I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. Christmas morning 2024. Fresh snow covering our suburban Denver neighborhood like a picture-perfect postcard. Presents under the tree that I'd wrapped myself because Mom's arthritis was acting up again. My parents smiling at me like everything was normal, like we were just another happy American family gathering for the holidays. The smell of cinnamon rolls filling the house. Frank Sinatra playing softly from the speakers. Everything exactly as it had been for 24 Christmases before this one. But when I walked to the kitchen for more coffee, I heard them in the living room plotting, not whispering, scheming, calculating like I was a chess piece to be moved around their board. Once we move Emma to the basement, Sophia won't mind sharing her room. It's bigger anyway, and she's always been so understanding about family needs. My mother's voice, casual as discussing the weather, talking about my childhood bedroom. The one room in this 3,200 square foot house that had always been mine. Then we can finish the basement properly. Make it like a studio apartment. Emma's 24 now. She should be thinking about independence anyway. Sophia needs stability for the girls after everything she's been through. Dad's voice, dismissing my entire adult life like I was a problem to be reorganized, not a daughter who deserved consideration. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, coffee pot trembling in my hands like evidence of something breaking apart inside me. 24 years of being the responsible daughter, the one who moved back home after college when Mom's car accident settlement ran out. The one who'd turned down my dream job in Portland, a marketing position at Nike that would have launched my career, to make sure my parents didn't lose the house they'd worked 30 years to pay off. And this was my reward. They were going to kick me out of my own room and stick me in the basement like an unwanted relative boarding in their house. Also, my drama queen sister could move back home with her twin daughters after her latest relationship disaster. But here's what they didn't know. Quiet doesn't mean weak. I smiled, walked back in, served them coffee with fresh cream and sugar, and agreed to do whatever would help Sophia and the girls feel welcome in our family home. I let them think I was the same accommodating Emma who'd spent her entire life making everyone else's problems disappear. While they celebrated Christmas morning and planned my displacement like I was furniture to be rearranged, I made a phone call that would change everything. 30 days later, moving day arrived. Sophia showed up with a U-Haul truck, my parents helping her carry boxes labeled with my room's name. Her 5-year-old twins Mia and Grace excited about their new big house, and plans to completely take over the upstairs bedrooms. When they walked through the front door, the woman standing there wasn't me. It was the new owner, Jennifer Walsh, a pediatric surgeon who'd just bought the house. Cash offer. Closed in 3 weeks. What happened next? Stay with me, because this story has twists you won't see coming, and an ending that proves sometimes the quiet ones have been planning all along. My name is Emma Catherine Mitchell. I'm 24 years old, a marketing coordinator who works remotely for a tech startup in Austin. And for the past 3 years, I've been living in my childhood bedroom in the house where I grew up in Littleton, Colorado. Not because I couldn't afford my own apartment. My salary was $75,000 a year, more than enough for independence in Denver. But because my parents desperately needed help after Mom's car accident in 2021, left them drowning in medical debt and unable to work. Let me paint you the picture of what my life looked like before everything exploded. Every morning, I'd wake up in the same sage green room I'd painted when I turned 16, surrounded by the same furniture I'd had since high school. My desk where I'd written college application essays now held my work laptop and marketing reports. The bookshelf that once displayed Harry Potter novels was filled with business books and industry magazines. My room had grown up with me, but it was still fundamentally mine. The one space in our family home where I existed as more than just a solution to someone else's problem. The house itself was stunning, honestly. Built in 1998, when Dad got his promotion to department head at Lincoln Elementary, it sat on a corner lot in Meridian Hills, one of those neighborhoods where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every house looked like it belonged in a home and garden magazine. 4 bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms, a finished basement that Dad had always planned to turn into his man cave, but never quite got around to, and an open concept kitchen that flowed into the family room where we'd spent countless holidays just like this one. The master suite took up most of the second floor's west side, with a walk-in closet bigger than most studio apartments, and a bathroom that Mom had renovated in 2015, with a soaking tub and separate glass shower. She'd spent weeks choosing the perfect marble tiles, debating between Carrara and Calicotta, finally settling on Carrara with gold veining that caught the light from the skylight Dad had installed as a surprise for their 25th anniversary. My room was smaller but perfect. Corner position with windows facing both the front yard and the side garden where Mom grew her prized roses. Each spring, she'd spend hours pruning and feeding those roses, talking to them like they were her children. The garden was her pride and joy, featured twice in the local garden club's annual tour. I'd painted my room sage green when I turned 16 because it felt sophisticated and calming. Hung string lights around the ceiling that gave everything a warm, dreamy glow, and filled every available surface with plants that thrived in the natural light. Peace lilies on the dresser, pothos trailing from the bookshelf, a fiddle-leaf fig in the corner that I'd nursed from a tiny cutting into a 6-foot statement piece. Sophia's room, directly across the hall, had sat empty since she'd moved out at 19 to live with her then-boyfriend Marcus. Bigger than mine by maybe 50 square feet, with a walk-in closet and private bathroom, it had been preserved like a museum to her high school glory days. Cheerleading trophies lined the dresser, including the state championship trophy from senior year when Jefferson High had won their division for the first time in 15 years. Prom photos were pinned to a corkboard above her vanity. Sophia in emerald green satin, Marcus in a matching tie, both of them looking like they owned the world. Dried corsages from homecoming dances sat in a shadow box on her vanity, alongside jewelry she'd left behind when she moved out in a dramatic huff after some fight with Dad about curfew. Mom dusted that room weekly, as if Sophia might return at any moment to reclaim her teenage kingdom. She'd spend 20 minutes carefully cleaning each trophy, straightening the photos, making sure the bed was perfectly made with the same purple comforter Sophia had chosen for her sweet 16. It was shrine maintenance, really, a monument to the daughter who could do no wrong, which, apparently, she was about to do again. The 4th bedroom had always been the guest room, though we rarely had guests who stayed overnight. Dad's brother Tom visited from Phoenix maybe once every 2 years. Mom's sister Janet came for Christmas every other year, and that was about it. The room was decorated in neutral beiges and creams, completely impersonal, like something you'd see in a mid-range hotel. A queen bed with a beige comforter, 2 matching nightstands, a dresser, and a single piece of art, a generic landscape print that came with the frame from Target. I'd been contributing $1,800 monthly to the household expenses since moving back home. Mortgage payment was $2,400. Utilities ran about $400. Groceries for 3 adults averaged $600. My contribution covered 3/4 of their fixed costs, but they still struggled with Mom's medical bills and Dad's reduced income from having to take time off to drive her to appointments and physical therapy sessions. The accident had happened on a Tuesday morning in March 2021. Mom was driving to her job at Presbyterian Hospital where she'd worked as a nurse for 18 years, when a drunk driver ran a red light and T-boned her Honda Accord. She spent 4 days in intensive care, 6 weeks in the regular hospital, and 3 months in physical rehabilitation learning to walk again without severe pain. The settlement from the drunk driver's insurance was $180,000 after legal fees, which sounds like a lot until you factor in the $90,000 in medical bills that her insurance didn't cover, the modifications they had to make to the house for accessibility during her recovery, and the income she lost during the 8 months she couldn't work. That settlement money had kept them afloat for exactly 18 months. By the time I graduated college in May 2022, they were 2 months behind on the mortgage and facing foreclosure notices. Dad's teacher salary of $62,000 a year had been enough when they were both working. But with Mom's income gone and her medical expenses ongoing, they were drowning. That's when I made the decision that would haunt me for the next 3 years. Instead of taking the Nike job in Portland that would have paid $85,000 starting salary with incredible benefits and advancement opportunities, I moved back home and took a remote position with a smaller company that paid $65,000, but allowed me the flexibility to help with Mom's care. At first, it felt like the right thing to do. The noble thing. I was helping my parents keep their home, contributing to Mom's recovery, being the responsible daughter they'd raised me to be. Dad would tear up when he thanked me for sacrificing my independence to help them. Mom would hold my hand and tell me I was an angel sent by God to save their family. But somewhere along the way, temporary help became permanent expectation. 3 years later, I was still in my childhood bedroom, still managing their finances, still coordinating Mom's medical appointments, still being the adult in charge of keeping everything together. And they were about to thank me by exiling me to the basement. Christmas morning started like every year since I'd moved back home. I was up at 7 a.m. starting the coffee and preheating the oven for Mom's famous cinnamon rolls. Though I'd been the one actually making them for the past 2 years since standing for long periods aggravated her back pain. Dad wandered down in his robe at 7:30, hair sticking up in every direction, grateful as always that someone else had handled the morning routine. "You're an angel, Em," he said, accepting his first cup of coffee in the Christmas mug he'd been using for 20 years. It was white ceramic with "World's Best Dad" in fading blue letters, a Father's Day gift from Sophia when she was 8 years old. "Don't know what we'd do without you." The words should have felt warm. Instead, they carried the weight of expectation, the subtle reminder that I was needed, essential, trapped by their gratitude and my own inability to disappoint them. Mom appeared next, moving carefully because her back was bothering her again. Winter was always rough for her. The cold made everything ache, and she'd been overdoing it with Christmas preparations despite my repeated offers to handle the decorations, gift wrapping, and meal planning. The accident had compressed 2 vertebrae in her lower back, leaving her with constant low-level pain that flared unpredictably. Some days she was fine, able to do light housework and take walks around the neighborhood. Others, she could barely get out of bed. "How are you feeling today?" I asked, the same question I'd been asking every morning for 3 years. "Not bad. The new physical therapy exercises are helping." She settled at the kitchen island with her coffee, watching me work with the same mixture of gratitude and guilt that had defined our relationship since the accident. "Sophia should be here around noon with the girls." Right on schedule, as always. Sophia lived 40 minutes away in Aurora, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough to avoid any real responsibility for Mom and Dad's day-to-day struggles. She worked part-time as a dental hygienist at a practice that specialized in pediatric care, barely 30 hours a week, just enough to cover her own bills and maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to as the family princess. Sophia had always been the golden child, but the accident had amplified the dynamic to an almost absurd degree. When she visited, she got credit for being such a devoted daughter for driving 40 minutes to have dinner. When I handled Mom's medical appointments, coordinated her prescriptions, and managed her insurance claims, it was just what was expected of the daughter who lived at home. The latest drama in Sophia's life involved her most recent relationship disaster. Marcus, not the same Marcus from high school, but confusingly also named Marcus, had lasted 7 months before things imploded spectacularly. According to Sophia's tearful phone calls to Mom, he was controlling, jealous, and completely unreasonable about her need for personal space. The real story, based on her social media posts and the fragments I'd overheard during her dramatic phone conversations, was that she'd been seeing her ex-boyfriend James behind Marcus's back and got caught. Marcus had found out when James tagged Sophia in a Facebook post from a concert they'd attended together while Marcus was out of town for work. The confrontation that followed had been nuclear, with accusations flying on both sides, and Sophia ultimately getting kicked out of the apartment they'd been sharing for 4 months. Now she was officially homeless, or as Mom delicately put it, going through a difficult transition period with her living situation. I finished arranging the cinnamon rolls on the baking sheet and slid them into the oven, then started on breakfast proper. Scrambled eggs with cheese, bacon cooked exactly how Dad liked it, crispy but not burned, fresh fruit salad with strawberries, blueberries, and grapes, orange juice in the glass pitcher that only came out for special occasions. The same spread we'd had every Christmas morning since I was 8 years old, when Mom had declared that Christmas breakfast needed to be special and memorable. Dad settled at the kitchen table with his newspaper, reading the sports section first as always, occasionally commenting on the Broncos' latest disappointment or the Nuggets' playoff chances. Mom sorted through the stack of Christmas cards that had arrived over the past 2 weeks, reading each one aloud and commenting on how the kids in the photos had grown, or how lovely everyone looked. "Oh, look at this one from the Hendersons," Mom said, holding up a card with a professional family photo. "Little Tyler is getting so big, and Beth looks wonderful. I should call her soon. We haven't talked since her mother passed." The Hendersons were family friends from church, one of those couples who seemed to have everything figured out. Mark was a software engineer who worked for one of the tech companies downtown. Beth was a teacher at an elementary school in Cherry Hills, and their 4-year-old son Tyler was the kind of kid who said please and thank you without prompting and shared his toys without being asked. "Emma, honey, can you grab the good plates from the dining room?" Mom asked as I set the last of the breakfast items on the counter. "I want everything to look nice when Sophia gets here with the girls. The good plates. China that came out maybe 3 times a year. Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. Always for special occasions involving my sister. When my college friends came for dinner during breaks, we used the everyday dishes. When I got promoted at work last spring, we'd celebrated with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, eaten straight from the containers while watching Netflix. But Sophia's visits required the finest everything. The china was kept in the dining room hutch, carefully wrapped in tissue paper and stored in padded containers like precious artifacts. Each place setting was worth more than I made in a day, according to Mom, who'd inherited the set from her mother and treated it with the reverence usually reserved for religious relics. The pattern was delicate, white porcelain with tiny blue flowers and gold trim that caught the light from the chandelier. I set the table carefully, each place setting positioned exactly how Mom had taught me when I was 12 years old. Plate in the center, fork to the left, knife and spoon to the right, water glass above the knife, coffee cup and saucer to the right of the water glass. Everything had to be perfect, because Sophia would notice if it wasn't, and Mom would be embarrassed if her eldest daughter thought she wasn't maintaining proper standards. As I folded cloth napkins and placed them beside each plate, I tried to ignore the familiar resentment building in my chest. This was family, I reminded myself. This was what you did for people you loved. You made things special. You went the extra mile. You showed love through attention to detail. But the resentment was becoming harder to ignore. Every special occasion was about Sophia. Every family gathering revolved around her schedule, her preferences, her needs. I'd been home for 3 years, contributing financially and emotionally to the household's stability, and I couldn't remember the last time Mom had insisted on using the good china for something involving me. Sophia arrived at 12:47 p.m., exactly 47 minutes late as always, with her twins in tow and enough luggage for a month-long vacation. Mia and Grace tumbled out of her Honda Pilot like golden retriever puppies, all blonde curls and bright energy, immediately transforming our quiet house into controlled chaos. At 5 years old, the twins were beautiful children. Sophia's genetics had been kind to them. Mia was the quieter of the two, with enormous blue eyes and a tendency to hide behind her mother's legs when meeting new people. Grace was the performer, already showing signs of the dramatic flair that ran in our family, prone to elaborate stories and grand gestures that made adults laugh and call her precious. "Sorry, I'm late," Sophia announced, though she didn't sound sorry at all. She looked good, I had to admit. New highlights framed her face in perfect honey blonde waves. Her makeup was flawlessly applied despite having 2 5-year-olds in the car for 40 minutes, and her outfit, skinny jeans, cashmere sweater, and boots that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, screamed effortless sophistication. Traffic was absolutely insane on I-25, she continued, accepting Dad's help with the girls' overnight bags. And these two had a complete meltdown about leaving their dad's place. Grace didn't want to leave her new dollhouse, and Mia was convinced we wouldn't be coming back. Dad immediately swept both girls into bear hugs while Mom fussed over Sophia's coat, asking if she was warm enough and whether she'd eaten breakfast. The prodigal daughter had returned, and all was right with the world. "How's James handling everything?" Mom asked carefully, as she hung Sophia's coat in the hall closet. James was the girl's father, Sophia's high school sweetheart, who she'd married at 21 in a beautiful ceremony that cost my parents $35,000 they couldn't afford. The marriage had lasted exactly 3 years and 2 months before imploding in a spectacular flame-out of accusations, custody battles, and divided assets. "He's being his usual controlling self," Sophia said, which I'd learned over the years meant he was probably asking reasonable questions about child support, visitation schedules, or whether she'd found stable housing for their daughters. "But we're managing. The girls are resilient, and we're focusing on the positives." I watched this performance from the kitchen doorway, noting how quickly the conversation shifted to accommodate Sophia's comfort level. No one asked hard questions about her housing situation or her employment status. No one pressed for details about what had gone wrong with Marcus, or what her long-term plan might be. No one mentioned that this was her third housing crisis in 2 years. Instead, Mom immediately launched into praise for how well Sophia was handling everything, how strong and independent she was, how lucky the girls were to have such a devoted mother. Dad chimed in with offers of help. Did she need money for groceries? Could he babysit the girls if she needed to apartment hunt? Would it help if he co-signed a lease to help with her credit situation? Lunch was the usual affair of Sophia holding court, while everyone else listened and offered support. She'd been taking online classes toward a nursing degree through Colorado Technical University, though she'd been taking these same prerequisite courses for 2 years without apparent progress toward actual enrollment in a nursing program. She was thinking about moving to Florida, where her friend Crystal had offered her a room in her condo. But the timing wasn't right with the girls' school situation, and the need to maintain their relationship with their father. Everything was always someone else's fault, some external circumstance preventing her from taking control of her life. The dental practice where she worked was reducing hours for part-time employees. The housing market was impossible for single mothers. James was being difficult about custody arrangements. Marcus had been emotionally unavailable. The online school's website was confusing, and their customer service was terrible. I'd been handling all the family logistics for 3 years, coordinating Mom's medical appointments, managing their insurance claims, paying bills, maintaining their budget, organizing household repairs. But Sophia got praise for remembering to bring Christmas presents for everyone. When I mentioned during the salad course that I'd just landed 3 new clients for my freelance marketing consulting side business, which would boost my income by about $2,000 monthly, the conversation lasted exactly 90 seconds before pivoting back to Sophia's housing situation. "I'm so proud of you for building your own business," Mom said with a warm smile. "That's wonderful, honey." Then, without missing a beat, "Sophia, have you had any luck with those apartment applications?" And we were off again, discussing the challenges of finding affordable housing in Aurora, the long waiting lists for decent apartments, the impossible requirements landlords were imposing on tenants. Everything centered around Sophia's crisis, as always. "I just can't afford market rate anymore," Sophia said, tears starting on cue. $1,800 for a 2-bedroom, and that's in neighborhoods where I don't feel safe walking to my car after dark. With my work schedule and the girls' activities, I need something stable and secure. Dad leaned forward with immediate concern, his fork hovering over his plate as he focused entirely on her problem. "Have you looked at subsidized housing? There are programs for single mothers, aren't there?" "The waiting lists are 2 years long," Sophia replied, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "And most of them put you in neighborhoods where I wouldn't feel comfortable raising the girls. I mean, I'm not trying to be a snob, but their safety has to come first." Mom reached across the table to squeeze Sophia's hand. Her face creased with worry. "We'll figure something out, honey. Family takes care of family. That's what we do." I felt something cold settle in my stomach like ice water. That phrase, "we'll figure something out," had been code my entire life for, "Emma will handle it." When Mom needed help navigating her insurance claims after the accident, we figured it out. When Dad needed someone to take over the household budget because he was overwhelmed, we figured it out. When the mortgage was 3 months behind and they were facing foreclosure, we figured it out. Every single time, "we" had meant me. I was the one who researched insurance policies and called customer service representatives. I was the one who created spreadsheets and tracked expenses. I was the one who used my savings to catch up their mortgage payments and then moved back home to ensure it didn't happen again. Now, they were going to figure out Sophia's housing problem, and I had a terrible, sinking feeling about who would be expected to provide the solution. After lunch, I volunteered to clean up while everyone else relaxed in the living room with the girls. It was tradition, established years ago when Sophia was still living at home and got to be excused from cleanup duty, because she was the guest whenever she came back from college. I loaded the dishwasher methodically, hand-washing the good china carefully, and drying each piece before returning it to the hutch. From the living room, I could hear Mia and Grace giggling as Dad performed his famous magic trick with disappearing coins, the same routine he'd done for every child who'd visited our house for the past 20 years. Mom was reading them a story, her voice taking on the dramatic tones she used for fairy tales, making the characters come alive. Sophia was probably on her phone, scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, occasionally commenting on whatever the girls were doing, but mostly letting my parents handle the entertainment while she relaxed. It was her pattern: show up, be charmed and charming for an hour or two, then mentally check out while other people managed her children. As I moved toward the living room to collect dessert plates, their conversation became impossible to ignore. "The basement is completely finished," Dad was saying, his voice pitched low but still audible from the kitchen. "Emma won't mind the change. She's always been adaptable, and it would give her more privacy." My hand stilled on the coffee pot I'd been about to refill. "And Sophia's old room is perfect for the twins," Mom added, her voice warm with the satisfaction of solving a problem. "They need space to play, and they'd love that big closet for dress-up clothes." Coffee grounds scattered across the white marble counter as the container slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. "We could set up Emma downstairs with a little kitchenette," Dad continued, warming to the topic like he was describing a home improvement project. "Make it like her own apartment. She'd probably enjoy having her own space, her own entrance. More independence." "It's perfect," Mom agreed. "Emma's always talking about wanting more independence. This way she can have it while still helping us with expenses and being here for my medical appointments." The coffee grounds looked like evidence of something breaking apart, dark specks across the pristine white surface like ants fleeing a destroyed hill. I stared at them, my mind trying to process what I was hearing. Then I heard Sophia's voice, and my entire world shifted on its axis. "Are you sure she'll be okay with it? Emma can be pretty stubborn when she doesn't get her way. Remember when she threw that fit about changing schools in 8th grade? I'd been 13, and they'd wanted to move me from Jefferson Middle School to Park Hill because it was closer to Dad's new job. I'd had friends at Jefferson, was finally settled after struggling socially in elementary school, and the thought of starting over in a new place had terrified me. I'd cried and pleaded for them to let me finish middle school where I was, promising to take the bus or ride my bike if transportation was an issue. They'd called it a fit then, too. A dramatic overreaction from a child who didn't understand adult decisions. They'd never acknowledged that I might have had valid feelings about being uprooted, or that my concerns about fitting in at a new school might have been legitimate. "She'll understand." Mom's voice was gentle but certain. "She always does. Emma's practical. She knows family comes first, and she'll see that this is what's best for everyone. Plus, it's not like she really needs all that space anyway," Dad added, his tone suggesting he'd thought this through carefully. "She doesn't have a boyfriend to worry about entertaining, no kids to accommodate, and she spends most of her time working anyway." The casual dismissal of my life, my needs, my right to consultation on decisions affecting me, hit like a physical blow. They weren't asking for my help or my opinion. They weren't considering my feelings or my comfort. They were redistributing the house like I was just another utility bill to be managed. My room, my sanctuary, my one space in this house where I existed as more than just a solution to someone else's problem, was already mentally Sophia's. I was being relocated to the basement without consultation, without consideration, because I'd been trained my entire life to accommodate everyone else's needs above my own. But here's what they'd forgotten in all their planning, what they'd overlooked in their casual reorganization of my life. The house wasn't theirs to redistribute. When Mom's accident settlement ran out in late 2022 and they couldn't make the mortgage payments, they'd been facing foreclosure within 90 days. I'd used my savings to catch them up, but $15,000 wasn't enough for the long-term solution they needed. The mortgage company was threatening to accelerate the loan, demanding payment in full, and my parents' credit was too damaged for refinancing. The solution had been to transfer ownership to me for estate planning and asset protection purposes. Their lawyer had explained it as a way to protect the house from potential medical debt, while giving them the option to stay in their home for the rest of their lives. I'd become the legal owner, responsible for the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance, while they retained the right to live there as long as they were alive. It had seemed like a reasonable arrangement at the time. I was already contributing significantly to their expenses, and the ownership transfer gave me control over the biggest monthly expense while protecting them from losing their home if Mom's medical bills spiraled out of control again. But what it really meant was that for the past year and a half, I'd been the legal owner of the house they were now planning to reorganize without my permission. I cleaned up the coffee grounds slowly, methodically, my mind racing through possibilities I'd never considered before. They'd made a miscalculation so enormous it took my breath away. They thought I was the same accommodating Emma, who'd spent her life absorbing everyone else's drama. They thought they could rearrange my life like furniture because I'd never said no before, never established a boundary they couldn't cross. They were wrong. I made fresh coffee with steady hands, arranged the dessert plates on a silver tray Mom had inherited from her grandmother, and walked back into the living room, wearing the same accommodating smile I'd worn my entire life. "Anyone want more coffee?" My voice was cheerful, normal, betraying nothing of the revolution happening behind my carefully composed expression. Dad looked up quickly from where he was helping Grace build a tower with blocks. "That would be great, honey. Everything okay? Thought I heard something fall in there." "Just clumsy with the coffee. No big deal." Sophia glanced at me with something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly across her features. She was too focused on her own problems to worry about mine for long, scrolling through her phone while keeping one eye on the girls. I poured coffee for everyone who wanted it, served slices of Mom's famous apple pie, though I'd been the one to make it from scratch the day before, and listened to them continue planning my displacement with increasing specificity. How they'd move Sophia's things back into her old room, how they'd convert part of the basement into a proper kitchenette, how the girls could use the upstairs bathroom for bubble baths and playing hair salon. With every word, with every assumption, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that I was done being their solution. "When were you thinking of making this transition?" I asked conversationally, cutting myself a small piece of pie. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, clearly pleased that I was engaging with their plan rather than resisting it. "Well, Sophia's lease is up February 1st, Mom said carefully. "So probably right after the holidays, once we get the basement properly set up for you. That gives us a few weeks to organize everything," Dad added. "Maybe get some proper bedroom furniture down there, set up that kitchenette, make it really nice. And the girls are so excited about having their own rooms," Sophia chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. "Grace wants to paint hers purple, and Mia wants yellow walls with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling." They were making plans for my room like it was already theirs, choosing paint colors, discussing furniture arrangements, deciding how to redecorate the space I'd called home for 24 years. "It sounds like you've thought of everything," I said with what I hoped was a supportive smile. "We're just trying to help everyone," Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand. "This works out perfectly for everyone involved." That night, I sat in my room, my soon-to-be former room, surrounded by everything that made it mine, and I made a phone call that would change everything. "Thompson Realty Group. This is Jessica Rodriguez." Jessica had an excellent reputation in the Denver metro area, known for fast sales and aggressive marketing. 3 of my coworkers had used her services in the past 2 years, all of them raving about her professionalism and results. "I need to sell a house quickly and quietly," I said without preamble, my voice steadier than I felt. "Okay." Jessica's tone was professionally interested but not surprised. In her line of work, she probably heard urgent sale requests regularly. "What's the timeline we're working with?" "My sister wants to move in February 1st. I want it sold before then." There was a pause, just long enough for her to process the implications. "And the current residents? We'll be very surprised to learn they don't actually own the property they're living in." Another pause, longer this time. Then Jessica's voice took on a note of genuine interest. "I think I'd like to hear more about this situation. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" The conversation lasted an hour and covered every detail from the property's legal status to my family's financial arrangement to the specific timeline I needed to work within. Jessica was thorough and professional, asking the right questions without judgment, taking notes as I explained how I'd ended up as the legal owner of my parents' home. "The market's extremely hot right now, especially for family homes in good school districts like Meridian Hills," she said finally. "With the right pricing strategy, we could have multiple offers within a week." "What about showings?" "The current residents don't know I'm selling." "We'll work around their schedule," Jessica assured me. "Evening showings, weekend appointments when they're out, private showings during work hours. It's completely doable if you're committed to the timeline and willing to be flexible with showing arrangements." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'm committed. Then let's do this. I'll draw up a listing agreement, and we can schedule the photographer for this weekend." The paperwork was signed electronically within an hour. Professional photos were scheduled for the following Saturday, when my parents would be at their weekly grocery shopping trip, and Sophia would be dealing with apartment viewings she couldn't afford. By the end of the following week, the house would be listed on every major platform, with a price designed to generate immediate interest and multiple offers. I spent the next few days playing normal, attending family dinners and participating in holiday traditions, while orchestrating the sale of their stability. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd trained me to handle complex logistics quietly and efficiently, and now I was using those exact skills to outmaneuver them. The photographers came on Saturday afternoon, transforming our family home into a real estate listing. Room by room, they captured everything my parents thought was permanently theirs. The kitchen where Mom had taught me to make her grandmother's recipes. The living room where we'd watched movies every Friday night for years. The master suite where my parents had slept for 26 years. My room, which would soon belong to complete strangers. Each photo session felt like documenting the end of an era, but I pushed down the sentimentality. This house had been beautiful, yes, but it had also been the setting for 24 years of being invisible, of being valued only for what I could provide, rather than who I was. The listing went live the following Tuesday with professional photos that made every room look magazine perfect. The price was set aggressively, $485,000 in a market where similar homes were selling for $450,000, $470,000. But Jessica's strategy was to price it just high enough to generate serious interest without scaring away qualified buyers. My phone started buzzing with showing requests within 2 hours. The first showing was scheduled for Wednesday evening, after Dad's school board meeting and during Mom's book club. I let the prospective buyers, a young couple expecting their first child, walk through my life while I sat in my car down the street, watching strangers evaluate my childhood home. They loved it. Spent an hour walking through rooms, measuring spaces, discussing which room would make the best nursery. The woman kept commenting on the beautiful natural light in my room, how perfect it would be for a baby's space with all those windows and the peaceful garden view. Thursday brought 2 more showings. A retired couple downsizing from a larger home in Cherry Hills. A family with 3 teenagers who needed more space and better schools. Each group saw potential where I saw the end of everything familiar. Friday morning brought our first offer. $475,000, conventional financing, 45-day close. It's a solid offer, Jessica reported over the phone. But I think we can do better. I'm expecting several more offers over the weekend, and at least 2 of them will be cash deals. She was right. By Monday morning, we had 5 offers, including 3 cash deals that could close within 3 weeks. The Hendersons are offering $495,000, all cash, with a 21-day close, Jessica reported. They're relocating from California for his job transfer and need to be settled before their son starts school in February. I thought about Sophia's plans, about her assumption that she'd be moving into my room in just a few weeks, about my parents' expectation that I'd quietly relocate to the basement like displaced furniture, about the fact that the Hendersons were the same family whose Christmas card Mom had admired just days earlier. Accept the Henderson offer. The house sold for $495,000, $10,000 over asking price, to a family who would appreciate what they were buying. The irony of selling to people my parents actually knew and liked wasn't lost on me. It felt like cosmic justice. With the proceeds, I purchased a small townhouse in Highlands Ranch for $320,000, leaving me with enough cash to pay off my student loans, establish a proper emergency fund, and start fresh without any family obligations. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued playing the perfect daughter while secretly coordinating inspections, appraisals, and closing documents. I attended Sophia's increasingly desperate apartment hunting expeditions, offering sympathetic comments about impossible rent prices and unreasonable landlord requirements. I helped Mom research school districts for the twins, discussing enrollment deadlines and registration requirements for children who would soon need new housing arrangements, all while knowing that none of it mattered, because by February 1st, they'd all be homeless. The performance required Academy Award-level acting. When Sophia brought paint samples to show me color options for her room, I admired every shade enthusiastically and even offered to help with the painting. When Dad mentioned measurements for the basement kitchenette and started pricing mini fridges and hot plates, I thanked him for being so thoughtful about my comfort. Inside, I felt like I was made of glass, brittle and transparent, holding myself together through sheer force of will. Every family dinner was a minefield of casual comments about the upcoming changes. Every conversation about future plans required me to maintain a fiction that was becoming harder to sustain. But I maintained the facade because they needed to believe everything was normal until the very end. If they suspected anything, if they realized I was planning something, they might try to stop it or take legal action to complicate the sale. Better to let them live in their fantasy until reality showed up with moving boxes and eviction notices. January 15th brought Sophia's excited Facebook announcement. Big news! The girls and I are moving back to the family house in 2 weeks. Sometimes life forces you to take a step back before you can move forward, and I'm so grateful to have parents who understand that family takes care of family. Can't wait for this new chapter with Mom and Dad, and for Mia and Grace to have their own rooms in the house where I grew up. Blessed Dapraus family, first Gauss new beginnings, Gauss, grateful. The post included photos of boxes already labeled Sophia's room and girls' toys, a picture of Mia and Grace jumping excitedly in front of our house, and a selfie of Sophia looking beautiful and relieved. Within hours, the post had accumulated 50 likes and 25 comments from friends, relatives, and acquaintances. So happy for you, wrote her best friend from high school. The girls are going to love having grandparents so close, commented our cousin Rachel. Your parents are angels for opening their home, added someone from her church. This is what real family looks like, wrote a friend from work. I screenshot every comment, every expression of support for the beautiful family arrangement that was about to implode spectacularly. Let her document her triumph. The higher the expectations, the harder the fall would be. January 20th brought the home inspection, scheduled during Dad's parent-teacher conferences, and Mom's physical therapy appointment. I let the inspector examine every inch of the house that would soon belong to the Henderson family, noting minor issues that would need addressing before closing. A leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, a few loose balusters on the staircase, some missing caulk around the master bathroom tub. January 25th was the appraisal, conducted by a cheerful woman in her 50s who spent 3 hours measuring rooms, taking photos, and comparing our house to recent sales in the neighborhood. The appraisal came back at $490,000, more than enough to support our sale price. January 28th brought the final walkthrough, where Mark and Beth Henderson toured the house that would officially become theirs in just a few days. They were lovely people, exactly the kind of family who deserved a home like this. Mark was patient and thoughtful, asking practical questions about the heating system and the roof. Beth was warm and enthusiastic, already planning where Tyler's toys would go and which room would become his playroom. We love what you've done with the garden, Beth told me as we stood in the kitchen looking out at Mom's roses. Are those David Austin roses? They are, I confirmed. My mom has spent years getting them established. She's quite proud of that garden. We'll take good care of it, Beth assured me. I've always wanted to learn more about rose care. They would take care of it. They would love this house the way it deserved to be loved, fill it with laughter and happiness, and the kind of family memories my parents had always imagined they were creating. January 30th arrived with the closing scheduled for 10 a.m. I told my parents I had a work meeting downtown and would be unavailable for most of the day. Sophia was busy with last-minute packing, excited about finally having stability for herself and the girls. At 9:47 a.m., I signed the final paperwork in Jessica's office, officially transferring ownership of my childhood home to the Henderson family. At 10:15 a.m., I received the keys to my new townhouse and a cashier's check that represented my freedom from 24 years of family obligation. At 11:30 a.m., I drove to my old house to collect my personal belongings while the family was out. My parents were at Costco buying supplies for Sophia's move-in, and Sophia was at Target getting bedding and decorations for the girls' new rooms. I had maybe an hour to gather everything that mattered and disappear. I climbed the stairs to my room one last time, taking in every detail I'd lived with for so many years. The sage green walls I'd painted with such care when I turned 16. The string lights that had created countless cozy evenings. The plants I'd nurtured from tiny cuttings into a thriving indoor garden. The desk where I'd done homework, written college application essays, and built my career. Sophia had already started moving her things in, I noticed. Makeup and hair products were arranged on my dresser. A few items of clothing hung in my closet alongside my own. She'd begun claiming the space like a colonist establishing territory, confident in her right to take what had always been mine. I collected my essential items quickly: photo albums, important documents, jewelry, my laptop and work materials, clothes for the next few weeks. Everything else could stay for the Henderson family to deal with. They'd bought the house furnished per our agreement. They could sort through what they wanted to keep and what to donate. The hardest part was leaving my plants. I'd grown attached to every single one, had spent years learning their individual needs and preferences. But there was no room for them in my new life, and maybe that was appropriate. This was about starting fresh, leaving behind everything that tied me to a family dynamic that had never served me well. As I loaded my car with the final box, I took one last look at the house that had been my entire world for 24 years. It looked the same as always, beautiful, welcoming, like the perfect family home it had always been designed to be. But it had never actually been a home for me. It had been a trap, a pretty prison where I'd been slowly suffocated by expectations and obligations I'd never agreed to take on. Now it would be a real home for a family who would appreciate it. I drove away at 12:15 p.m., just as my parents' car was turning onto our street from their shopping trip. Perfect timing. That evening, I attended my last family dinner in the house where I'd grown up. Mom had made my favorite meal, chicken parmesan with garlic bread and roasted vegetables, though she didn't know it was a farewell dinner. We talked about normal things: Dad's upcoming retirement planning, Mom's progress with her physical therapy, Sophia's excitement about tomorrow's move. "I can't believe how perfectly this worked out," Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze Sophia's hand. "Having you and the girls here feels like the family coming full circle. And Emma gets her independence downstairs," Dad added, smiling at me with genuine warmth. Win-win for everyone. Sophia looked happier and more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. The stress lines around her eyes had softened, and she kept talking about how grateful she was to have family support during a difficult transition. "I promise I won't be in your hair," she told my parents. "The girls and I will contribute however we can. I can help with cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. You just worry about getting settled," Mom assured her. "We're so happy to have you home." I raised my wine glass, savoring what I knew would be the last normal moment before everything changed forever. To new beginnings for all of us. We clinked glasses, and I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family I'd always wanted us to be. Relief that I was finally free from the family we actually were. February 1st dawned cold and clear. Perfect moving weather according to Sophia's morning text message sent at 6:30 a.m. with 3 exclamation points and a house emoji. She'd rented a U-Haul truck and recruited 2 friends to help carry furniture. The plan was to have everything moved by noon, then celebrate with pizza and champagne. I drove to a coffee shop in Highlands Ranch near my new townhouse and found a table with a view of the parking lot. At 9 a.m., I turned off my phone and ordered a large latte, preparing to wait for the inevitable explosion. The Henderson family was scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. for their final walkthrough and key exchange with Jessica. They'd driven down from their hotel that morning, excited to take possession of their new home and start their new life in Colorado. From what Jessica had told me, they were wonderful people who deserved a fresh start. Mark had gotten a promotion that required relocation from Sacramento, and Beth had already secured a position teaching 3rd grade at Cherry Hills Elementary. Tyler was excited about having his own backyard, and maybe getting a dog once they were settled. They had no idea they were walking into what was about to become a family war zone. At 11 a.m., I turned my phone back on to find it exploding with notifications. 63 missed calls, 47 text messages, 31 voicemails. The notification counter kept climbing as the phone caught up with the morning's chaos. The messages started confused and escalated to frantic, then moved into territory I'd never seen from my family before. Sophia, 10:12 a.m. "There are people here with keys saying they bought the house? Call me now." Dad, 10:15 a.m. "Emma, there's been some kind of mistake with the house. Please call immediately." Mom, 10:18 a.m. "Honey, we need you home right away. Something's very wrong." Sophia, 10:23 a.m. "These people have paperwork saying you sold the house. What did you do? What did you do?" Dad, 10:31 a.m. Emma Catherine Mitchell, you call us this instant. This is not a joke. Mom, 10:45 m. Please come home. I don't understand what's happening. There are strangers in our house. Sophia, 10:52 a.m. You destroyed my life. My kids have nowhere to go. I will never forgive you for this. Never. I read through each message methodically, feeling a strange combination of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that the plan had worked flawlessly, that I'd finally taken control of my own life. Sadness that it had come to this at all, that my family had made it necessary to choose between their expectations and my well-being. The voicemails were even more revealing. Dad, 10:20 a.m. Emma, these people are saying you sold the house to them. That can't be right. You need to fix this immediately. The moving truck is here. Sophia's friends are here to help her move, and these strangers are claiming they own our home. This has to be some kind of mistake with the paperwork. Call me back right now. Mom, 10:35 a.m. Honey, I'm so confused. These nice people have papers that say they bought the house from you yesterday. The woman is very polite, but she's insisting that we need to leave. There must be some kind of error. Please call and explain what's happening. Sophia, 10:48 a.m. What you did is illegal, Emma. You can't sell someone's house without telling them. I'm calling the police. I'm calling a lawyer. You can't get away with this. My children are here, they're scared, and you've made them homeless. How could you do this to your own family? By the time I finished reviewing all the messages, my phone was ringing again. Dad's contact photo, a picture of him from last Christmas, smiling as he opened a gift I'd carefully chosen for his hobby woodworking, filled the screen. I let it go to voicemail. At noon exactly, I drove to my new townhouse to wait for the inevitable confrontation. My new home was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a tiny yard where I could plant a garden, and most importantly, no room for extended family to move in permanently. I'd furnished it minimally, but thoughtfully. A comfortable couch, a small dining table, a bed, a desk for my work setup. Everything I needed and nothing I didn't. No guest room that could become a permanent residence. No space for anyone to get too comfortable. The confrontation came at 1:30 p.m. when my entire family arrived in Dad's sedan, their faces ranging from confused to devastated to absolutely furious. I met them at my front door, my expression calm and controlled despite my racing heart. We need to talk, Dad said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. Do we? Emma, you sold the house, Mom said, tears already streaming down her face. How could you do that without telling us? We live there. That's our home. It was my house to sell. Legally, I've been the owner for over a year. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia stepped forward, her face red with rage and disbelief. Your house? That's our family home. We've lived there for 26 years. I've been the legal owner since Mom's medical debt crisis, I said calmly. The ownership transfer you signed for estate planning purposes? That made me responsible for the mortgage, the taxes, the maintenance, and all the legal rights that come with ownership. That was just paperwork, Dad sputtered, his face pale. For insurance and debt protection purposes. It wasn't meant to change anything about how we lived. The paperwork that made me solely responsible for a $2,400 monthly mortgage payment, while you planned to give my room away without asking. Mom's face crumpled completely. We thought you'd understand. We thought you'd want to help Sophia and the girls. I've been helping this family for 3 years, I said, my voice remaining steady despite the emotion building in my chest. I gave up my dream job, moved back home, used my savings to save your house, contributed $1,800 monthly to expenses you couldn't afford, and you repaid that sacrifice by planning to exile me to the basement. We never asked you to do any of that, Sophia snapped, her voice rising. You chose to move back home. Nobody forced you. You're right. I chose to help because I thought families were supposed to support each other, but I was wrong about what kind of family we actually are. The argument continued for 25 minutes, cycling through the same accusations and justifications. They couldn't understand how I could be so selfish, so cruel, so heartless. I couldn't understand how they could feel entitled to someone else's property, someone else's sacrifice, Someone else's life. Dad tried the guilt angle. After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed raising you, this is how you repay us? Mom tried the family loyalty approach. We're your parents, Emma. This is your sister. Blood is thicker than water. Sophia tried emotional manipulation. My kids are going to be homeless because of you. They're 5 years old, Emma. 5-year-old girls who just want a stable place to live. But I'd heard it all before, and I was finally immune to the tactics that had controlled me my entire life. Here's what's going to happen, I said when they paused for breath. You're going to figure out your own housing situations like adults. Sophia, you're going to get a full-time job that pays enough to support your children instead of expecting other people to subsidize your lifestyle choices. Mom and Dad, you're going to live within your means instead of expecting me to bankroll your retirement. Where are we supposed to go? Mom asked through fresh tears. We're 58 and 62 years old. We can't start over. I don't know where you'll go, but you'll figure it out the same way you expected me to figure out being happy in a basement while you gave my room away to accommodate someone who's never contributed a dime to the household expenses. This is beyond cruel, Sophia said, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine devastation. My kids need stability. They need a home. Then you should have provided it instead of expecting me to sacrifice mine. I walked back into my townhouse and closed the door firmly, leaving them standing on my front step. Through the window, I watched them argue among themselves for another 15 minutes. Dad gesturing angrily, Mom crying, Sophia on her phone probably calling everyone she could think of for help, before finally driving away. That evening, the phone calls and text messages started in earnest. Extended family members who'd heard different versions of the story. Friends from church asking if it was true that I'd left my family homeless. Former neighbors expressing shock that sweet, responsible Emma Mitchell could do something so heartless to the people who'd raised her. I answered exactly 5 calls that night. Uncle Tom, Dad's older brother, who'd always been the family truth-teller. Your parents have been enabling Sophia since she was 16 years old. Maybe this will finally force all of them to grow up. My college roommate Sarah, who'd watched me sacrifice myself for years. It's about time you chose yourself. I'm proud of you. Jessica Rodriguez, who called to confirm the closing had gone smoothly. The Henderson family absolutely loves the house. They're already talking about putting in a swing set for Tyler and maybe adding a deck off the kitchen. It's going to be a very happy home. My co-worker Amanda, who'd used Jessica as her realtor the previous year. I heard through the grapevine what you did. Holy shit, Emma. That's the most badass thing I've ever heard. And finally, Dr. Patricia Chen, the therapist I'd been seeing sporadically for the past 6 months to deal with family stress. I'd scheduled an emergency session for the next morning, knowing I'd need professional support to process what I'd just done. How are you feeling? Dr. Chen asked when I called. Honestly, free. For the first time in my adult life, I feel free. That's a healthy response. You've just set the most important boundary of your life. The aftermath unfolded exactly as I'd expected, but somehow it was still shocking to watch my family's carefully constructed world crumble in real time. My parents, suddenly faced with housing costs they couldn't afford on Dad's teacher pension and Mom's disability payments, had to scramble to find accommodations. At 62 and 58, they discovered that rental applications require proof of income, good credit, and landlord references, none of which they possessed after 3 years of financial instability and relying on their daughter's support. Their first week was spent in a Motel 6 that cost $89 per night, eating fast food and trying to figure out how to find an apartment when you have no recent rental history and limited income. Dad had to take early retirement to have more time for apartment hunting, which reduced his monthly pension payments. Mom's disability barely covered her medical expenses, leaving them with maybe $300-200 monthly total income. They finally found a 2-bedroom apartment in Thornton, a 40-minute drive from their old neighborhood, for $1,750 per month. It was clean, but basic, maybe 900 square feet total, with thin walls and neighbors who seemed to have very active social lives at all hours. After rent, utilities, and Mom's medical expenses, they had maybe $800 monthly for food, gas, and any emergencies that came up. Dad had to take a part-time job at Home Depot to help cover expenses, something that would have been unthinkable when he was a respected elementary school principal with 30 years in education. Mom's physical therapy appointments became less frequent because they couldn't afford the copays, which meant her mobility and pain levels began deteriorating. Sophia's crisis was even more dramatic and public. With exactly 0 notice and no savings, she had to find immediate housing for herself and 2 5-year-olds. The reality of market-rate rent for a single mother with minimal income hit her like a freight train traveling at full speed. Her first week was spent couch surfing with friends, dragging Mia and Grace from house to house with suitcases and stuffed animals, trying to maintain some semblance of stability while frantically searching for affordable housing. But affordable housing for a family of 3 on a part-time dental hygienist's salary didn't exist in the Denver metro area. She finally found a 1-bedroom apartment in Aurora for $1,400 monthly, which left her with maybe $600 for all other expenses after rent and utilities. Sophia slept on the couch while the twins shared the bedroom, their belongings crammed into whatever space they could find. The commute from Aurora to her job in Littleton increased her gas expenses significantly, while decreasing the time she could spend with her children. For the first time in her adult life, she had to face the full cost of her lifestyle choices without a family safety net to catch her when she fell. The community reaction was swift and divided. Half the neighborhood thought I was a monster who'd abandoned my family in their time of need. The other half thought I was a genius who'd finally escaped an exploitative situation. The story spread through social media, church groups, and coffee shop gossip like wildfire. "Did you hear what the Mitchell girl did?" became a common conversation starter at school pickup lines and book clubs across Littleton. "She sold the family home while they were out shopping," was one version. "She left her parents homeless after they'd raised her for 24 years, was another. "She'd been paying for that house for 3 years and they were trying to steal her bedroom," was a third. People chose sides based on their own family dynamics, their experiences with adult children living at home, their opinions about family obligation versus personal autonomy. The Mitchell family drama became a sort of local Rorschach test. What you saw in the situation revealed more about your own values than about the actual facts. My social media became a battlefield overnight. Friends from high school, distant relatives, acquaintances from various jobs, everyone had an opinion about my choices and felt compelled to share it publicly. "Family is supposed to stick together no matter what," wrote my cousin Jennifer, who'd had her own parents babysit her kids for free for the past 8 years. "Good for you for setting boundaries," wrote my friend Katie, who'd been in therapy for years dealing with her own toxic family dynamics. "I can't believe you do this to people who love you," wrote someone from my high school class, who'd probably spoken to me maybe 5 times total in 12 years. "Your parents raised you better than this," wrote my 10th grade English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, which stung because I'd always respected her. I stayed off Facebook for 2 weeks and let everyone else argue about my character and my choices. The legal threats came next, as I'd expected they would. A certified letter from Johansson and Associates, a law firm in Denver, arrived exactly 1 week after the sale closed. The language was intimidating but ultimately meaningless. You can't commit fraud by selling property you legally own, and you can't claim adverse possession of a home when you're living there with the owner's permission. The letter accused me of deceptive practices, breach of family trust, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded that I reverse the sale, compensate my family for their relocation expenses, and provide suitable housing until they could secure permanent accommodations. My response was simple and devastating. Copies of the property deed showing my name as sole owner, the mortgage documents I'd been paying for 18 months, the closing paperwork from the sale, and a note that any further harassment would result in a restraining order and a complaint to the Colorado Bar Association about frivolous legal threats. The letters stopped immediately, apparently, even lawyers unwilling to take money for a case they couldn't win. 3 months after the sale, I ran into Mom at King Soopers. She was shopping with coupons and generic brands, her cart containing the basics of someone living on a tight budget. She looked older, smaller somehow, wearing clothes I didn't recognize, probably from Walmart or Target instead of the department stores where she used to shop. "Emma," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Hi, Mom." We stood there awkwardly in the cereal aisle, surrounded by everyday shoppers who had no idea they were witnessing a family reunion that would probably be our last. "How are you?" she asked finally. "I'm good. Really good. How are you and Dad adjusting to the apartment?" Her eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. "It's different. Everything's so different now. Different can be good," I said gently. "It can be a fresh start. Your father misses the house terribly. He drives by it sometimes, just to see what the new family's done with the yard. I'd driven by once myself, curious to see how the Hendersons were settling in. They'd added a swing set for Tyler, planted colorful flowers in the front beds, and put up a basketball hoop in the driveway. The house looked happy, lived in, loved. "The Henderson family seems wonderful," I said. "Their little boy is about the same age as Mia and Grace." Mom nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "Sophia's struggling. The apartment is so small, and the girls miss having their own space. She's working more hours now, trying to make ends meet." I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the old reflex to fix things and make everything better for everyone else. But I pushed it down firmly. "That's hard," I said neutrally. "But she's strong. She'll figure it out." "Will you ever forgive us?" Mom asked suddenly, her voice breaking. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with 3 months of pain and anger and disappointment. "Mom, you taught me my whole life that family takes care of family. I finally learned to take care of myself. But we're still your family," she whispered. "You treated me like the hired help, not like family. There's a difference." She reached out as if she might touch my arm, then let her hand fall back to her side. "We love you, Emma. We always loved you. Maybe you did, but you never respected me. And without respect, love doesn't mean much." I left her standing there in the cereal aisle, another woman in her late 50s trying to rebuild a life she'd taken for granted. 6 months after the house sale, I received an unexpected letter, not email, but an actual handwritten letter, from Dad. It was the first communication I'd had from either of my parents since the grocery store encounter with Mom. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Dad's careful teacher handwriting, and it surprised me with its honesty. "Emma, I've been thinking about what happened for 6 months now, and I need to say some things I should have said a long time ago. Your mother and I made terrible mistakes with how we treated you, especially in the years after you moved back home to help us. We got comfortable with your sacrifice. We started seeing your contributions as something we were entitled to rather than something we were grateful for. When Sophia needed help, our first instinct was to solve her problem with your resources, your space, your comfort. We didn't think about what you might want or need because you never complained. I realize now that we raised you to be so accommodating that you couldn't advocate for yourself without feeling selfish. Then we took advantage of that conditioning for our own convenience. The basement plan wasn't about giving you independence. It was about making room for Sophia while keeping you available for our financial and emotional needs. We wanted to have our cake and eat it too, keep benefiting from your support while treating you like you didn't deserve equal consideration. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to try to rebuild our relationship. I'm writing this because you deserve to know that we understand what we did wrong. You didn't sell the house out of spite or cruelty. You sold it to protect yourself from people who had stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and rights. We're learning to live within our means now. It's hard, and we're probably always going to struggle financially, but that's not your responsibility. It never should have been your responsibility. Sophia is learning too. She's working full-time now, has found a decent daycare for the girls, and is starting to understand what it actually costs to support a family. It's been good for her, even though it's been difficult. I hope you're happy, Emma. I hope you're building the life you want instead of the life we expected you to live. You deserve that. You always deserve that. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, then set it aside for a week before reading it again. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. It was the first sign that they might actually be learning from the consequences of their choices, instead of just resenting me for imposing those consequences. I didn't respond immediately. Forgiveness was a process, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that step yet. But for the first time since Christmas morning, I felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe, eventually, we could find a way back to each other as equals, instead of as rescuer and rescued. 2 months later, Sophia sent her own message, much longer and much more emotional. "Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been in therapy for 3 months. and my counselor suggested I write you a letter, even if I never send it. I decided to send it because you deserve to know that I finally understand what I put you through. Living on my own with the girls for the past 8 months has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most important. For the first time in my adult life, I'm handling everything myself. I'm paying my own rent, buying my own groceries, managing my own budget, dealing with my own problems without calling mom and dad every time something goes wrong. I'm embarrassed by how much I took advantage of your generosity over the years. Every time I had a crisis, I knew you'd be there to help fix it, either directly or by contributing to the family resources that got redirected to solve my problems. I treated you like my personal safety net instead of my sister. I never appreciated how much you sacrificed to keep our parents' house. I never understood that you were paying for the mortgage while I was complaining about them wanting me to do dishes when I visited. I never recognized that you'd given up your independence to provide the stability I took for granted. When I found out you'd sold the house, my first thought was anger. How could you do this to us? But after months of struggling to pay my own bills and take care of my own responsibilities, I finally understand what you were trying to tell us. You weren't our solution. You were our daughter and sister, and you deserve to be treated like one. The girls and I are doing okay. It's tight financially, and I'm working more than I ever have, but we have our own space and our own routine. Mia and Grace are learning what it means to live within a budget, to appreciate what we have instead of always wanting more. They're actually proud that Mommy is taking care of everything by herself now. I don't know if you'll ever want a relationship with me again, but I wanted you to know that I'm finally becoming the person I should have been all along. You didn't ruin my life by selling the house. You forced me to start living it. Thank you for that. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to finally grow up. Love, Sophia. That letter I did answer, but only briefly. Thank you for saying that. I'm proud of you for learning to take care of yourself and the girls. That's what I always hoped you'd do. It was a small step, but it felt honest. Maybe someday we could be sisters instead of enabler and enabled. The house itself was thriving under the Henderson family's care. I drove by occasionally, not to torment myself, but because it was on the route to one of my favorite hiking trails. They'd painted the front door a cheerful blue, planted sunflowers along the fence, and installed an elaborate playset in the backyard where Tyler could play with friends. The house looked loved, lived in, appreciated in a way it had never been when it was the site of family drama and financial stress. Mark had put in the deck Beth had wanted, extending the kitchen into outdoor living space. Beth had expanded Mom's rose garden, adding new varieties and a small herb garden near the kitchen window. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd just accepted the basement apartment, if I'd let them reorganize my life to accommodate Sophia's crisis. I'd probably still be there, increasingly resentful and invisible, watching my dreams disappear while everyone else got comfortable at my expense. Instead, I was writing a different story entirely. 1 year after the sale, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. My townhouse had become exactly what I'd hoped, a peaceful space that reflected my tastes and priorities. I'd planted a small garden where I grew herbs and vegetables, filled the rooms with plants and art I chose myself, created a home office where I could build my freelance consulting business without family interruptions. My work had flourished when I wasn't emotionally drained by constant family crises. I'd gotten 3 major new clients, increased my rates significantly, and was considering partnerships with other consultants to expand into larger projects. I'd even started teaching marketing workshops at the community college, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the energy for. Most importantly, I'd learned what it felt like to prioritize my own needs without guilt, to say no without justification, to live for myself instead of as a supporting character in someone else's story. I'd started dating again, something that had been impossible while living with my parents and managing their crises. Marcus, a software developer I'd met through a hiking group, understood boundaries because he'd had to set them with his own complicated family. We were taking things slowly, but it felt healthy and balanced in a way my previous relationships never had. 1.5 years after the house sale, I received one final communication from my family. Not a letter or email, but a card. A simple birthday card from my parents with a note inside. Emma, we hope you're having a wonderful birthday and a wonderful life. We think about you often and hope you're happy. We're proud of the woman you've become and the strength you've shown. Maybe someday we can be part of your life again, but only if and when you're ready. Until then, know that we love you and respect the choices you've made. Happy 26th birthday. Love, Mom and Dad. It was the first time they'd ever said they respected my choices. The first time they'd acknowledged that rebuilding our relationship would require them to earn their way back into my life, not just expect me to forgive and forget. I kept the card, but I didn't respond. I wasn't ready yet, and that was okay. Healing happens on its own timeline, not according to other people's convenience. 2 years after selling the house, I had coffee with Jessica Rodriguez to celebrate her helping me buy a small investment property. As we chatted about the local real estate market, she brought up the Henderson family. "They're wonderful neighbors," she said. "Beth volunteers at Tyler's school. Mark coaches Little League. They've made that house a real home." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it completely. "Do you ever regret it?" Jessica asked carefully. "Selling, I mean." "Cutting ties with your family?" I considered the question seriously. Did I regret it? I regretted that it had been necessary. I regretted that my family had valued control more than relationship. I regretted that 24 years of conditioning had made it nearly impossible for me to advocate for myself without feeling guilty. But did I regret choosing myself when no one else would? Did I regret refusing to be a victim of their expectations? Did I regret trading their approval for my freedom? No, I said finally. I regret that it came to that, but I don't regret choosing myself. Good, Jessica smiled. You know what the best part of your story is? You didn't just escape. You built something better. She was right. I hadn't just run away from a bad situation. I'd created a good one. I'd turned their betrayal into my liberation, their expectations into my independence, their crisis into my opportunity. Some people called me cruel for walking away from family. Others called me brave for choosing myself. I'd stopped caring about other people's opinions of my choices. For the first time in my life, the only approval that mattered was my own. They'd taught me to be quiet, to accommodate, to always put family first. But they'd forgotten something crucial. Quiet people see everything. And when pushed too far, they don't explode. They plan. I caught them promising my room to my sister at Christmas. I served them coffee with a smile. And then I sold the house and bought my freedom. Sometimes the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's refusing to be a victim anymore. And that brings us to the end of this story. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey of family drama, betrayal, and ultimate liberation, thank you for your time and attention. Stories like this aren't just about real estate or family conflicts. They're about recognizing when love becomes exploitation and finding the courage to choose yourself, even when everyone around you says you're selfish for doing so. I know many of you watching have experienced something similar. Maybe not with a house, but with family members who treat your kindness as weakness, who expect your sacrifices while offering nothing in return, who assume you'll always be available to solve their problems because you always have been before. The pressure to forgive, to understand, to always be the bigger person can be overwhelming, especially when it comes from the people who raised you and claim to love you. What do you think? Did Emma make the right choice by selling the house and cutting contact with her family? Was it too extreme, or exactly what the situation required? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? What would you have done in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone, that other people have faced impossible choices and survived them. If this story resonated with you, and you want to hear more like it, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this community grow and allows me to keep sharing stories that might help someone recognize their own worth and find the strength to demand better treatment from the people in their lives. Drop a comment with your take on this situation, and I'll see you in the next story. Remember, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the most powerful lesson you can give is walking away from those who refuse to learn. Until next time, choose yourself. You deserve a life where your needs matter too.